Hello and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Memories. I am Wax the Brain Hussein, joined as always by Fash, the $1 Million Fan. Fash, we are at an extraordinary landmark for one of wrestling's biggest shows.
Absolutely, Wax. I'm looking forward to our show today and the show we're going to see tomorrow night, UK time. It's the 30-year anniversary of Monday Night Raw. Raw is War. We call it Raw again. Unbelievable. So the first show took place on the 11th of January 1993. It was a milestone. Who would have thought back then that it would be, I think, the longest running television show, if you think of weekly episodic television. It's really unbelievable, and our show is going to be a little bit different today as well. I think we're not going date by date, are we, for this 30-year anniversary? I mean, WWE is doing it tomorrow, but it's close enough, and I'm really looking forward to the show they put on and how many previous faces we see.
Yeah, we're recording on the Sunday before Raw anniversary number 30 takes place. For some reason, I have no idea why WWE have decided to do this 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks later than the actual show. But
maybe Vince McMahon coming back had something to do with it.
Yeah, maybe he knew the plan all along, didn't he? That's big news. Maybe we should mention that very briefly, Fash. Vince is back.
Yeah, I don't know what to say on it. So much has been said, Wax. It might require another episode, I think. His coming back is shocking, but he's Vince McMahon. You couldn't really have thought of him kind of going away, retiring in the sunset. There's more news that's came back since. There was obviously rumors of a potential sale to the Saudis.
Well, you had sold them off, Fash.
I had sold them off, yeah. I mean, me and many others. I thought that would have been some news item, but it seems right now it's not official. But certainly they're up for sale. There's been discussion about what the valuation would be. Vince is back, supposedly to seal the new TV rights deal and to oversee the sale. So there's lots of turmoil again going on behind the scenes. He's recently settled an allegation which goes back to the 1980s with a lady. So there's lots going on. I think you'll probably need another episode to discuss all that, Wax. But this is a happier time, I guess, in 1993. It's before the steroid trial as well, and this was the beginning of what would be an incredible legacy for him and WWE, Monday Night Raw.
And that 30-year anniversary ties nicely into our timeline as well. As a reminder, we've just finished off Survivor Series 1992. We've had a little run-up to at the end of November, December, and now the start of 1993 Raw. The very first Raw is going to kick off, and we've got a very special show lined up today. Tell them about it, Fash.
Yeah, it's going to be a watch-along show. So we've done one of these before. We did it for the 1992 Royal Rumble. You can catch that in our archives. It was one of our favorite shows. It did really well on the podcasting platforms. It was audio only, and similar to what some other podcasts do, such as the Conrad Thompson podcasts. We basically watch the show, give our comments. You do the same. So when we give you, I guess, the invitation, we'll give you a little countdown. You find Monday Night Raw, the first episode on the WWE Network or Peacock or wherever you can access it. Play at the same time as us. Take the audio off, and we'll enjoy the show together. So it's our second watch along of our series so far, Wax, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's not the greatest show in terms of how this Monday Night Raw legacy would evolve, but it's historic given it was the first one. At this point, nobody really knew what would be taking place in the coming years. It replaces primetime wrestling, which was a staple. But yeah, I'll throw it back to you. Let's do a little countdown and let's enjoy the show, and give our thoughts on it. We are both watching it cold. We've both not seen this in, I think, a few years at least. So it really is going to be watching everything as if it was the first time again.
So just a reminder, go onto the WWE Network, go into the shows category, select Raw, and there's a drop down which lets you pick the year 1993. Scroll down to the very bottom of the page, and it's the very last show on the page, but the very first Raw ever. And with that being said, Fash, let's do the countdown. 3, 2, 1. Let's play.
Here we go. And it's the big opening, Wax. Actually, it's interesting in the sense that, well, what I'm getting right now is a Broken Skull advert. But I don't know if you're getting the same, which is not ideal.
I'm going to pause, Fash. So you tell me when.
I'll tell you when I'm live, right? Because
when you can see the show.
As much as I love Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah.
That's
the WWE Network.
Here we go. I've got it now. I can see that background of Manhattan, New York. It's a different start straight away. You know, you've got Sean Mooney outside the building. Now, this was a very interesting building, the Manhattan Center, and we're going to see how different it looks from shows up to that point. But you've got Sean Mooney there, and straight away, Bobby the Brain Heenan is turned up, and I think he wants to get into the show, given usually he's the co-commentator on these things.
Yeah. So I think what's happened in the primetime show just before this, the final time show, Bobby Heenan assumes that he's going to get an invite to Monday Night Raw, but it's Gorilla Monsoon that tells him no, he's actually barred from the arena, and they're not expecting to see Bobby. So this is Bobby's first attempt at getting into the arena, a sold-out arena, they say. Interestingly enough, the Manhattan Center, where this is all happening, the Grand Ballroom, it's incredible to think nowadays where the shows are in arenas and big stadiums. It's just a big tall building, and in the middle of it there's a grand ballroom, and that's the arena that they use. And this very special intro, which I'm talking over, actually sounds pretty good. It sounds very like Saturday Night Live type, you know.
Yeah, no, it's different. Like you say, it's that kind of, you know, the sirens in the background, very different, very quick. And then, you know, we go to the arena and straight away you can see this is different. We recognize Vince McMahon. We recognize the Macho Man. There's a third jabroni there with sunglasses, and his name is Rob Bartlett. So he is actually the co-commentator for this. I think straight away Vince has always been looking for some sort of mainstream rub. Now, I don't know how mainstream Rob Bartlett was in 1993 in the US. He must have had some credibility, but we didn't know him in the UK. But he was a radio jockey and a comedian, Wax. And I know from watching some shows after this, when I was on a Raw bench some years ago, that he's going to be extremely annoying and actually.
He doesn't last long, does he? But yeah, as you say, Vince loves this whole live shock jock, radio DJ type guy, and you know that's who Rob Bartlett really much is. Just what are your thoughts on the show, on the appearance?
On the show, we just started
on the actual appearance. Fash.
Well,
we've got balconies on one side. We've got
I mean, right now
a small crowd. We've got Coco Beware coming into the ring for the first match.
Yeah, that's the appearance I'm not liking. But I mean, straight away. So one thing to note here, and all UK fans will remember this, is we didn't get Raw straight away. I don't think we got Raw until 1995 actually. So we'd get our highlights of Raw via Superstars Challenge and WWF Mania, which was a show that I loved. So at this point, you know, watching this and seeing highlights of it, it was very different. And I actually liked the fact that it was quite intimate and, you know, quite basic. Even at that age, watching this, I knew this was something different. And I also remember it was one of the WWF magazines at the time. Maybe the January, February edition. That would make sense in terms of timeline, where they showed kind of, you know, pictures from the set and the co-commentators. So yeah, straight away it's different. It does feel very kind of, you know, that you're there because it is so intimate, and it's very different from what we're used to seeing, you know, in Wrestling Challenge and Superstars.
Yeah, and that's what I really thought about it, is that intimate feeling. Actually, very ECW like, you know, where they used to have the crowd, you know, really drawn in onto the ring, and you have got the balconies. And let's remember, this is a ballroom basically. This is an orchestra specialty arena made specifically for that. Somehow Vince and his crew decided that this would be the best place to host a wrestling show, as we see Yokozuna in the ring now with Coco Beware to open the match. We've talked a little bit about Yokozuna being new to the WWF, just very recently coming in at the end of 92. Just going back to the arena very briefly.
You've got such a thing for this arena. Carry on.
I do. No, I mean, it's just that it's interesting, the whole setup, like why they chose this particular place, because it's not an easy place to set up a ring. If you've heard Bruce talk about this, you know, this is several floors up, and there's only one elevator that is allowing sort of large materials to be taken up. So every week or every second week, they would have had to transfer everything up several floors, then down several floors to pack it away. It's just not, you know, an easy to use arena. But even then, they decided to go ahead with it. They had options to build a brand new arena just next to their old sort of merchandising office next to in Stamford, Connecticut. But I think eventually they thought, you know, that would be too costly. To create a brand new arena.
Yeah, I'm just seeing the backside of Yokozuna right now, Wax. So as you're talking, that's what I'm seeing. You know, I'm surprised this arena or this ballroom can actually take Yokozuna and his girth here. But you know, but you're right. I mean, it's obviously we didn't know that, and you learned later on what the kind of makeup of this building was. What's interesting, why we keep talking about it, is that this is going to be the kind of weekly happening.
Yep.
We're not moving from arena to arena. This is the Raw setting, and it is going to be, I think, till late 93, maybe 94. I think it is late 93. They start I think they start in the Hartford Civic Center, and then they actually take it outside of New York, and eventually it does become, you know, a kind of touring show like everywhere else. But this is going to be part of the whole kind of look and the kind of, you know, what they're trying to go for here. So it's one place where it's happening. So similar to your point, I guess, you know, the ECW arena, what that would become. And I guess for WCW, they had, you know, the soundstage at Disney, MGM. So this was WWF's version, but yeah, I liked it. And when they moved away from this, I remember seeing clip not liking it as much because I was kind of, you know, this is what Raw is supposed to be from what I've seen. So they will decide to kind of move. But initially, I think it's great. I do have some memories of this arena and the kind of angles that took place in it, but we'll talk about those in the coming weeks. But as a kind of opener, you know, we're talking about 30th anniversary of Monday Night Raw. One thing we're going to learn watching the show is that, you know, at this point, most matches were still squash matches, right? You did get your kind of big matches here and there on Superstars Challenge and Saturday Night's Main Event, but in most cases it was kind of development or jobber talent, you know, enhancement.
Well, if you're going to tell me Coco Beware is a jobber talent here, Fash, I'm not going to take that very well.
Right, okay, I got a question for you.
But
name me a match that you recall that Coco Beware won against an established star.
Can't remember, Fash. It's been some time since I watched Coco Beware in action.
Well, at this point, and look, he's going to get destroyed here because the key point to note here is we are 2 weeks away from the Royal Rumble here, and this match is all about showcasing Yokozuna.
Of course, this
look
is
at a big leg across Coco Beware.
I mean, that's a 300-pound leg. Something that Fash eats on a Saturday night.
That is something weekly. On a Saturday night, yeah.
But I mean, again, just you know, the intention for this brand new show, Fash. We've just gone away from primetime wrestling, which, you know, has been running for several years. I think something like 417 shows they created of primetime. And we've moved away from that studio setup into a small arena. And much of the intention was, A, to look very different to what they've been doing previously. And then secondly was to reduce costs a lot by not traveling from arena to arena, having a set place that they could film and set up. Which eventually
I'm going to have to stop you there because, you know, Yokozuna is about to do the bonsai splash on Coco Beware. Look at the crowd reaction here. Everyone's getting up. He's on the
second. They're asking him to go up to the top rope. And
now he's going bonsai, boom, on the chest of Coco, and he is history.
I mean, this is one of the most impressive looking moves of the era, because a guy of this size landing softly on anybody is not a given.
At this point, we didn't know he was landing softly. We believed that this is destroying chests here. So it's an interesting opener. It's a squash match. And how many people know that in terms of trivia? The opening match of Monday Night Raw was Yokozuna against Coco Beware. Unfortunately, Yoko's not with us anymore. It'll be interesting if we see Coco on the anniversary episode. Maybe not, but it would be quite a nice throwback. Like you know, if one of the bloodline maybe, you know, comes out and destroys Coco, it'd be a nice throwback. I think. I
mean, you do have a thing for Coco getting destroyed. I'm not sure why.
Well, I just think it'd be a nice callback, wouldn't it? And now we're getting a promo now, January 24th, 1983. It's going to be the Royal Rumble wax. So this is 2 weeks away from the Rumble, as I say, and the hype is very much on.
For us, we're actually only 1 week away from the Royal Rumble, and hopefully to tie in with that, we'll have a very special Royal Rumble watch along for the 93 edition.
And we'll give our thoughts on what we witness next Saturday as well in the actual 2023 version of the Royal Rumble. So here it is, the quick hype video. Of course, a lot of people, this is on the USA Network, so they might not be catching, you know, the other shows. So it's important. We go back to the announce table. We see a Raw girl, which people forget. Everybody remembers the Nitro girls, but you had these Raw girls in the initial shows as well, Wax, which I know got you a little bit excited when you were reminded of this. But you know what's also interesting, you talk about the setting, the arena, you know, this has got no Raw written anywhere on the canvas, even though, you know, there's nothing written, it's just like a blue ring and there's not much happening here. It's not the bling that I'm showing you here because this is a special show. I've got the Wrestling with Memory LED light show going on in the background. This is very plain, but I'll tell you who's not playing, Bobby the Brain Heenan, who's shown up on my screen. And you know what he's talking about here, Wax?
He's talking about the Narcissus.
He calls him the narcissist here. He's going to become the narcissist. And there's a mystery around this character.
Yeah, and if you obviously know that word and its impact on wrestling, you know who he's talking about. But he ran a couple of different promos prior to this,
Yep.
and he's very much talking about Mr. Perfect and him bringing him this brand new guy to challenge Perfect and put him away. Obviously,
Who's beyond perfection.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, at this point, Max, would you have thought Ric Flair's still around, right? Now, we'll get to what happens to Ric Flair in the coming weeks, but were you thinking here as a kid, take yourself back, that somebody's coming in to be Ric Flair's partner? Because Bobby Heenan's obviously associated with Ric Flair. Mister Perfect's the common enemy. They're bringing someone else in. Was that how your brain was working here? Because it feels as if, he's kind of transitioning to this new person, but he's still with Rick. Take yourself back.
Absolutely. And actually, I was thinking back when I first seen this promo, I was thinking back to obviously what then happens in the WrestleMania to follow. There's a match between who Bobby's talking about and Mr. Perfect. And I was thinking like that must have been, to me, it was cold back then. Like I didn't understand it. And actually, it clicked when I rewatched this recently. It sort of clicked to me why they got to that point.
Yeah.
And obviously, they must already have known at this stage that Ric Flair was maybe heading out the door. I don't know if they knew this early, if they were transitioning.
I think they did. I think we're going to get to it. Rick's going to be around for the next 2 Raws. And the one in a couple of weeks is going to be the big one, which is his final appearance. So I think
Fash, just to interrupt you, why don't we say hello to probably one of our most favorite tag teams of all time, the Steiner Brothers.
The Steiner Brothers are in the WWF now, Wax. They had made their debut post Survivor Series 1992, one of the most decorated tag teams. I must admit, at this point, I had only seen a couple of the old WCW Steiner brother figures. I had seen them on some covers of WCW tapes. I don't think I'd watched a WCW pay-per-view yet back in January of 1993, so I was aware of them, but didn't know much. But I know straight away, I have a memory that when they debuted, I saw them first at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view when they take on the Beverly Brothers. I hadn't seen their initial outings, but I remember you being a fan straight away of Scott and Rick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they just had a tremendous look. I love the jackets that they used to come in with.
Just look at the moves as well.
And the athleticism of Scott. And when I was growing up, I never really realized how big Scott was even back here. Like, I know we think as a big Papa Pump character, he was huge, but even this, he's huge. And he was doing these things that, much smaller guys.
There's Doink in the crowd as well. Doink the Clown, the best iteration. He's still causing havoc with the fans.
Fans are loving it, actually.
And I like that here once again. It's that kind of live vibe.
Yeah.
Anything can kind of happen here. There's a match going on, but Doink has been doing for several weeks now, kind of distracting people in the crowd around about. And he's gonna have an angle coming up shortly with a superstar. But this is the Steiners against the Executioners.
And you can tell the jobber was not ready for that.
Yeah, and you tell that these Executioners, like I think any wrestler ever called the Executioner, isn't going to do much. And that's a Steiner line from Rick Steiner there. This is another showcase. It's another jobbers versus
Rick Steiner. Somebody who's I think really underrated in the game. We talk about Scott a lot, I think, but Rick never really gets the same sort of mention because he never had that singles run, did he?
He came in first in Mid-South, and then WCW, part of the Varsity Club, and then eventually teaming up with his brother. But you're right, everyone talks about Scott. I think when they went their separate ways, Rick and Scott, when they had that little feud that was disappointing in WCW, Rick
we're going to have to pause there for just a second.
An outsider's turned up.
An outsider's
Wax is not in pain. I've sent some guys to bar him. As you say, Rick didn't really make it as a single star, and then Scott Steiner did. But I think you forget how great they were as a tag team sometimes, especially if you're a fan who transitioned into wrestling later on. But this is a showcase. They are new here. We've talked about the tag team division, Wax. We talked about Survivor Series 1992, where it was looking a little bit disappointing. Now the LOD are gone, but now you've got teams like the Steiner Brothers coming in that straight away, right? These guys are going to be players at some point, and probably some point soon. It's a shame though that we didn't get the Legion of Doom and the Steiners and the WWF at the same time. But there you go. I don't know if you've seen that bulldog from the top rope from Rick. Scott Steiner holding the jobber, and that's a win and a pin for the Steiner brothers here. And the crowd is going crazy. You can see that.
They're such a babyface team. Like, I know that there was occasional runs where one or the other had a heel run, but really, they're such a babyface team.
And this was a good finisher, right?
Yeah.
With we talk about the Doomsday device, but this with kind of
It's kind of the
Scott,
reverse of that, isn't it? But
Scott having the one person on his shoulders and then a bulldog from Rick Steiner. But I'll be honest with you, at this point, Wax, I remember I was not a huge Steiner's fan. I mean, I love their movie things, but not to the level that I was LOD. But anyway, next segment, Wax, talk about this. Let's talk about this segment.
Well, here we've got Sean Mooney on the outside of the arena, and we've got a lady trying to barge her way into the arena. Shouting.
That lady looks familiar to me.
Oh, I don't know, Fash. I've never seen her before in my life.
So for those watching, and you should be watching along with us, it's the whole point. This is Bobby Heenan's second attempt to come in, and basically, he's wearing a wig. He's trying to be an old lady, and Sean Mooney rips the wig off his head.
That was pretty impressive job from Bobby Heenan. He's a man of many talents.
Very quickly, you can tell these are pre-taped segments, right, that are going to basically take place. But hilarious. Bobby Heenan is going to be the star of the show, and we see an advert for Razor Ramon's going to be interviewed, and here he is in the ring, Wax.
Yep, and Razor Ramon oozing machismo as always. Earlier on in the show, it was announced that it would be Bret Hart and Razor Ramon in the Royal Rumble main event, or secondary to the main event in a world title match. And really, again, they've just transitioned very coldly from Razor Ramon, Macho Man, to Razor Ramon and Bret Hart very, very quickly off the back of Survivor Series. And I don't know whether that's got something to do with Macho Man deciding he didn't want to wrestle at this time, or whether it was Vince's call with a new show coming up. He just wanted a completely different direction.
This is going to be the whole kind of confusion around the Macho Man over the next few years now. It's disappointing. I mean, we hear, people like Bruce Pritchard saying that Macho wanted to, join the commentary team, but later on we've heard that Macho Man very much didn't. He wanted to still wrestle, and he's still going to wrestle. He's going to be at this Rumble event, and he's going to be, seen here and there in the coming weeks and months. But you're right. I mean, Survivor Series, you're thinking there's still something there left between Razor and the Macho Man. We've got Flair perfect, but we did raise the question previously, Bret Hart, who's his opponent's going to be, but they have done that cool transition, I say, to Razor and Bret. And I guess, Bret takes the title from Rick, so you can kind of, bring it all together. But yeah, you feel once again, Razor is getting the push of a lifetime here.
This is his second big angle since joining, obviously.
Yep.
Immediately he was involved with Macho Man and Mr. Perfect, and straight off the back of that, he's now in the world title picture with Bret Hart. And again, the way they set this up was a little bit strange, because they had Ric Flair come out initially, and then they had Razor Ramon come out on an
earlier
episode.
Superstars, isn't it? Yeah, Superstars.
And it was very much set like Ric Flair was talking about he's going to regain the title back from Bret Hart, but then
Mr. Perfect shows up in the angle as well, doesn't he? I think
to save
because
Bret
I think you're confusing the viewers here, Wax, and the listeners with your stuff. But
it's all right. The listeners are smart, Fash.
They are smart.
We can trust them.
And there's Raymond Rougeau. They're showing WWF Mania, the show I mentioned earlier. Owen Hart was being interviewed, and Razor Ramon attacks Owen Hart, and this was to kind of make it more of a blood feud between Bret and Razor. But I think the gist of this interview, Wax, is basically Vince McMahon saying, essentially implying that haven't you got this too quickly, Razor? Bret Hart, it took him 8.5 years to become champion, and Razor's point as well. He's got a title shot in months, and he's going to take that championship title. But going back to what we're discussing, I at this point, as a kid, thought the direction that they might go in, and for Royal Rumble or WrestleMania, and we'll talk about this topic in a little bit more detail, because I think it should have been a banger match. Should be a match we saw, was Bret Hart taking on the Macho Man.
Bret Hart versus the Macho Man.
That should have been the match. It shouldn't have been Razor, because if you think about it, we're talking about Macho's lost it to Flair, then Bret's beat Flair. To really put Bret up there, a match which would have been babyface versus babyface, Macho Man against Bret Hart, I think it would have just been excellent. And obviously Bret takes the match, and that still means the Macho Man's in that main event picture. You could have done that. Now I thought that would be at Royal Rumble or at WrestleMania, and at the Royal Rumble event we're going to kind of see maybe potentially at one point in that match you think that could be it. But what's your thoughts on that? Because it would have been a banger match, right?
Oh yeah, definitely
proper main event, and if you're trying to put Bret Hart over, it works. But they decide to go down this route and not doing much for the match when he's a participant in the Royal Rumble.
No, it's interesting. Certainly, it's not one that I had even considered. I thought maybe they would have eventually headlined WrestleMania with Bret against Ric Flair, if everything had went to
Nobody's gonna
plan.
pay for that, man.
Come on,
They
man.
wanted
You
to
got the
see
two
they
of the
wanted to
best
see-
wrestlers in the world.
Well, given Rick and Bill Minson, man, I didn't think that, and we'll get to that. Why
Well,
Rick
we know
feels
Rick wasn't there
shortly.
anyway. And here
Um,
comes a guy on screen that Fash absolutely hates, just like he hates all Native Americans. I don't know why,
oh,
but it's
this is a
Tatanka
ridiculous statement. I love
with
Native
his
Americans.
bright
I
red
love all
hair.
people. But yeah, there's the Tatanka there. Do his little thing. That's good. That's
Not too
good
bad,
enough.
I would say. It's pretty good.
I mean, you
Tatanka
could,
obviously still fairly new to the company. He had a big feud with Rick
He had a
Martel. I say
big
big,
92.
I should say long. And here comes somebody.
You love
special,
this guy.
Fash.
This guy is somebody who you mentioned to me when I came to your house. This case, you said there's a new guy called Max Moon, and you were trying to be Max Moon, and you were trying to do forward rolls around your lobby. Here he is.
Well, just look at his outfit. Look at the charisma that this guy's just oozing.
This is very
rolling around the ring.
1990s, isn't it? But I mean, the story. This is Paul Diamond. It was supposed to be Conan at one point. Comic Kid. He was supposed to be Max Moon. If you go online, you can see different iterations of this. But Conan didn't sign. They gave the suit to Paul Diamond because it fit. And, he's going to turn into a jobber very quickly, which, after the initial promise and hype. But a guy that's going to go from strength to strength is his opponent here, Wax, the Intercontinental Champion, man that main evented Survivor Series 92, Shawn Michaels, against Max Moon here.
What iconic look Shawn Michaels has. Like, I think he's cemented himself even now as a really top level player in the WWF. Despite not having necessarily the title.
Well, you've got top level player next to you as well. I think it's another guy that another guy you've not paid.
That's another pause on the show, Fash.
That's fine. Look, see, the guy's not happy. Basically, you've not paid him back. I've sent him over to sort you out. So I hope he really roughs you up. And we'll take a pause here because Wax is going to take a beating. And then so pause everyone, and we'll be back in a few seconds. Well, we had a bit of a pause there, Wax. It wasn't Max Moon. I sent Max Mini to attack you, one of my henchmen. And the $1 Million Fan, I know he did a number on you, but we are back now. So where were we, Wax? I've got it at 22 minutes exactly. I'm going to give it a 3, 2, 1 countdown, and then we'll kick off again, okay? And I promise I've not sent any more henchmen to attack you. So 3, 2, 1, go. And it's just the beginning of Shawn Michaels and Max Moon sizing each other up.
Yeah, we were talking about Shawn Michaels being a bona fide main eventer, really. I think even though he's the Intercontinental Champion here, I think we've already established the fact that he's going to be a mainstay in the WWF for the time being. And actually, this is a pretty good match. I do recall some of it from some time ago. 2 reasonably good performers. I think they actually came up in the wrestling business together. And they, very early on, people were thinking Paul Diamond was going to be the one that would have the more successful career, but never turned out that way. Obviously, Shawn Michaels was the real superstar out of the lot of them. But yeah, I mean, the outfit just a bit too jazzy, I think, to take off.
Yeah, it's got more of a 1980s vibe and then maybe 1993 vibe, but I mean, we're going to still be in this kind of comic era, but I can see what they tried to do. But yeah, it just feels a little bit of place. As you say, I can't say I'm fully versed on Paul Diamond, but yeah, it's the AWA. I think you're referring to. The kind of were there at the time. I think Paul Diamond was part of Bad Company. And then am I right? He was also in the Orient Express. He was the masked man of the two. Kato, he was. Yep. But yeah, I mean, a worker looked decent.
I mean, that's superb. What you just seen there is like a wrist lock.
He didn't get the chance.
Yeah,
didn't get the chance to really show more. And yeah, this is going to be a very short-lived run as well, and then we won't see him again.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning what's going on here with Shawn Michaels. He's just off the back of obviously Survivor Series 92 with that main event against Bret Hart. Just prior to that, he had that run-in with Marty Jannetty, who returned after quite a long absence. We had that great scene where the mirror sort of explodes into Sherry's eye. And what we're setting up for really is that feud to continue between Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, absolutely. If you go into our archives, we've got the initial barbershop incident. We also cover the angle of Marty Jannetty returning in one of our more recent episodes. But yeah, this is setting up Royal Rumble 1993 again. You're going to have the first big match between the Rockers, Marty Jannetty versus Shawn Michaels. And I remember at the time I was excited about this match and what it would potentially be like. But yeah, I mean, so straight away, even though this is more of a competitive match, they've been kind of giving Max Moon a push.
Yep.
And, this is going to be more back and forth. If you knew your stuff at the time, you would know that Shawn Michaels is going to come out victorious here, given he's only 2 weeks away from the Rumble.
Yeah, I mean, the Max Moon character, they did sort of really push the boat out early on with they had all this extra gear on him when he was coming out of the ring. It looked like cardboard boxes.
But did that actually
a spaceship?
I'm trying to remember here. Was that the stuff that we didn't see though in the dark matches with Conan?
Yeah, well, you've seen it because it was there. It was shown on TV, but never live in this format.
Right. Okay.
But
I can remember that whole.
As he comes out here, he's coming out very much in his own clothes. So already they've probably assumed that this guy's not going to work. And here we've got Doink again. Arm in a sling for some reason.
Yep, that's going to lead to something. That's going to lead to something, as you know. But here's another veteran out there, Matt Bourne. As we said, he's really played this character so well. People mock Doink the Clown. We made this point, but it was a great gimmick as a heel, and his facial expressions, how he changes them, are just excellent. But yeah, once again, another match where he's in the back, kind of distracting. A bit of a small package attempt there by Max Moon, but he can't get the job done. And Shawn Michaels then hits him with a punch to the face, and Doink's enjoying what's going on in the ring and also enjoying interacting with the crowd.
Yeah, it's you've got the Rob Bartlett obviously trying to make jokes in the background. I think Vince probably loved it. Vince probably loved having him on commentary with him.
Yeah,
that's the sort of character that Vince likes.
I can see Vince enjoying him maybe initially and then getting pretty bored of it because I just don't think. Yeah, he obviously if he would have been great, he would have stuck around for longer, right? But I think his humor was kind of the tone.
He's got quite a high-pitched voice.
Yeah, he's a commentator as well. You don't feel if he knows a lot about the product.
Yeah.
And he's got some... And you Macho Man, what I noticed in these kind of initial episodes, if I remember, I went on that kind of binge, and we'll do it again now, given, the podcast, is that at times Macho Man just kind of jumps in and kind of veers the conversation where it needs to go, which was, I thought Macho Man was such a pro as a commentator. When you heard him, he was always kind of, he really tried. But yeah, Rob, as I say, is going to last till April, I think. And then Bobby the Brain Heenan is finally going to get his position in the kind of 3-man team. But in terms of this match, it's a decent match, I say. Another small package attempt by Max Moon. And obviously up to now in this show, this is the first kind of competitive match that we're seeing after, a couple of squashes, interview, little Royal Rumble promo. So in a sense, this is the kind of featured bout up to this point. And I'm sure part of the audience, the number of people thinking there Max Moon might have a chance. Though what I would say about this match is it's obviously not the quickest pace. And, it's kind of some rest holds.
A lot of rest holds.
Yeah, and then, so it's not really, I think Shawn was still developing, the kind of pace that he was going to work at. It is quite similar to some of the stuff he was doing in that Survivor Series main event against Brett. So it is more kind of rest holds and kind of being a little bit more cerebral, like one of his friends would be years down the line. But just kind of looking at this situation here in terms of the reaction from the crowd, the commentary, Max Moon trying to get the crowd on his side. At this point, when you look at the picture, would you expect, nowadays, I think we would expect some sort of appearance from Marty Jannetty coming out, and facing Shawn Michaels, maybe standing outside watching the match or afterwards. But we don't really get that. It's more just hype that's being generated, through the standard build-up. And there's a slingshot attempt by Max Moon.
I think Shawn Michaels is probably one of the best at taking that bump.
Kind of bump.
Usually into
and he's going to go over. And this is a bit... So here, Max Moon can jump over top rope, and then he's going to do a whoopee cushion.
This is impressive because a lot of these moves here are things that you see these days, guys flying over the top ropes the way Shawn Michaels did, and then that maneuver there by Max Moon. So two very athletic guys.
But I keep, when I watch Max Moon, I keep thinking, what would it have been like if Conan was, doing this? Can you imagine we could have got Conan against Shawn Michaels? Obviously, they would have went different directions. But then what I think is, who would have Max Moon, right? I mean, I'll tell you, the first luchador that I saw that blew my mind, and I watched that match so many times, I just couldn't believe somebody could be so quick, was Rey Mysterio Jr. in 1996 against Dean Malenko.
Right, yeah.
The American Bash. I remember catching that on Nitro, my friend's house, and I was blown away because I'd never seen anything like that. I'd not seen his stuff in New Mexico. I know you used to be a big Yushin Thunder Liger fan as we were growing up, but that was, can you imagine somebody like Rey Mysterio playing this sort of character?
Yeah.
In 1993, it would have been another level. Whereas Max,
Yeah, just to
some of the
probably
iconic stuff, but you know,
yeah.
he's not super exciting with
Yeah.
some of it. But you know, if he really would have caught the imagination, you know, this character would have ran a bit more.
Yeah, and Shawn Michaels there with the win, using that sort of back suplex
Which was his
maneuver,
first
which
kind
was
of
his first finisher, but
yeah.
really nothing compared to Sweet Chin Music, which he would develop a little bit later on.
I just saw that Wax. I mean, talking about Max Moon, he actually initially, I believe, had a match on this Royal Rumble card. He was supposed to take on Terry Taylor, who
Okay.
was back, and I think he was terrific Terry Taylor again. But they dropped that match, and he is part of the Royal Rumble match itself. But yeah, that's a kind of back and forth match. But you know, the right man wins. Shawn Michaels wins.
Well,
A
here we
little bit of
go.
a foray, but yeah, there's a bit of an
promo
ad
coming
here.
for the WWF Mania show, I think it is.
Yep,
Yeah.
this was what I watched because we didn't get Raw in the UK, and you used to give me tapes of
Yeah.
Manias recorded, or I'd get them from elsewhere, and that was kind of the show where I saw highlights of superstars and Raw. And
This was sort of a studio show.
Todd Pettingill
Yeah,
presenting
yeah.
it in the studio, and talking about Todd Pettingill, we'll speak about more about.
Yeah.
I think Sean Mooney's going to leave over the next few weeks, so he's going to be gone before WrestleMania, but he's featured prominently in the first, I guess, 2-3 weeks at least of Monday Night Raw. And there's a Royal Rumble report now, Wax. This is following up on what many consider as the greatest Royal Rumble. We covered it in the archives as a watch along, but it's the 93 version coming after that epic 1992 version.
Yep.
I think what we're going to learn, as you start seeing the names, we've discussed how many people have left the company since that last edition. So there's going to be some big names here, but then some other names which are a little bit more middle of the range.
Well, that's it. 92 featured a lot of Hall of Famers. A lot of people probably towards the end of their careers, but still reasonably big names if you consider what the card looked like in the early 90s.
And they're talking about the Shawn Michaels Marty Jannetty match here, and Sherry in the storyline going in was Sherry was going to be there, but whose corner would she be in? And that was the big story after, I say, that situation where she went through the mirror.
Yeah, I think adding to that storyline, I think basically is what happened is Sherry legitimately was taken to hospital because she had a shard of glass in her eye.
Yep.
But as part of the storyline, they were talking about how Marty Jannetty had asked about her health and well-being. But one person who hadn't had that conversation was Shawn Michaels, who was obviously too busy, living it up as the Intercontinental Champion to care too much about Sherry Martel. But Sherry would be back at the Royal Rumble. We would see exactly how that would go.
Yeah, and obviously going back to that angle, I see you check out in the archives, in that situation, Marty Jannetty returns. He's going to face off against Shawn Michaels. There's that brilliant visual of, Shawn Michaels sees Marty in the mirror.
Yeah.
But then the whole angle is that Shawn pulls Sherry in front of him and Marty strikes her with the glass mirror as opposed to Shawn. And yeah, she's been in hospital since then. But that's one of the big storylines in matches going into the
And it's
event.
something they picked off really well after a very long gap, because obviously Marty Jannetty was out of the business. But the way they picked it back up was ideal. The one thing I'd say about Marty Jannetty is they never changed his gear or his style or his visuals. And I think if they had, he had potential to go on and become a bigger babyface than even he was. And I think every time he came into the business, he actually did really well, but his look just wasn't updated, and I think it really hampered the ability to push him as a babyface.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, if it wasn't for his demons, which we know about, that obviously got him fired more times than you can remember. But same point I was going to raise, so we're a little bit telepathic there, Wax, is the fact that every time, and he probably didn't push for it, WWE didn't, he was always Marty Jannetty, the rocker, the same music. See, at this point, he had to have a different character.
Yeah.
It's like Shawn Michaels had evolved, and over time, Shawn Michaels is going to outgrow him, and he's still going to play this guy, be it in 93, 94, when he comes back in 95, and then there's new rockers in 96, and even when he goes over WCW for a cup of coffee, it's the same look. This is, really a key point here that you've raised. He didn't evolve, and they didn't do anything to help that either.
Maybe he just didn't want to pay for a new outfit, Fash. He wanted to keep the tassels.
That obviously didn't work out in the long term. And look, they're going through all the participants on the Royal Rumble. We got big Yokozuna in there. We've shown people like Bob Backlund, and now a promo is what I'm seeing between Yokozuna and Mr. Fuji, who still has the hair here, Wax.
Yes, he does.
In coming weeks, he's going to go into that bald-headed look, but he's still kind of the new attire, but similar look to how Mr. Fuji was before. And of course, as I say, we believe that Yokozuna was a big sumo wrestler from Japan, still very new here. But obviously
he played it terrifically. I mean, none of us really had any qualms about him not being from Japan. We were very much had fallen under
Yeah,
the
and here's
spell of the
Macho Man
WWF.
shown in it.
Yeah,
Papa Shango, he's just not over anymore. Berserker,
Yeah.
suppose he had gone missing after SummerSlam, but he's back.
Carlos
Was
Colon.
and we'll talk about what Gorilla Monsoon called him in our watch
Yeah.
along in the Royal Rumble. That there's Tenryu there. They've talked about
El
Bob
Matador
Backlund.
looking suave as
But
usual.
you see, Tugboat, it's not the same level overall as what we saw in the previous year. There's Samu, another newcomer, Fatu, his partner in the Head Shrinkers, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So he's one of the kind of that 90s peak era.
Somebody who's not actually been featured much in the last few months, certainly since we've been watching. I think there was that brief period where he was with Sergeant Slaughter, but then afterwards he sort of went off the radar again. I wonder whether that was enforced or not. But yeah,
I think he's going to be odd in this little period, and he's not going to last much longer. We will see a little bit more from him in the coming weeks, but yeah, he just feels like one of those guys from that era where maybe not, he's going to feel out of place in the coming months and really be putting others over. But certainly a big name at the time. And obviously the first time here, Wax, we should raise this, the stipulation for this Royal Rumble was that the winner would get a championship match at WrestleMania. This was the first time they officially announced that. And I look at the main event of Razor Ramon and Bret Hart for the WWF Championship. As I say, I felt it should have been the Macho Man versus Bret Hart, or if not here, then at WrestleMania. That's how my brain was working then. Of course, in Bret's book, he talks about how it was supposed to be the Warrior, and he was going to make the Warrior submit to the Sharpshooter. I really don't believe that.
I don't think the Warrior was submitting to anything.
No chance whatsoever. But we've certainly seen that mentioned by Bret in the past. I can't see that. And now look, we get back. It's outside again. Sean Mooney. It's a cold night. He's out there with some fans. And now a gentleman's going to try to get in again.
Yeah, we've got a Jewish-looking gentleman. I think maybe a rabbi or something. It's certainly a fake beard. It looks like it's Bobby
like
Heenan again, Fash.
It's a bit like your beard.
It's he's playing a Jewish character here, Bobby Heenan, trying to get back into the ring, back into the arena.
Get into the arena, not back in.
Into the arena. Sean Mooney is making sure that he's doing his duties and making sure.
And look, the beard's going all over the place, and now Bobby Heenan's pulled it down, and he's been caught yet again, and he's pleading with Sean Mooney to let him in. It does feel like a cold night, doesn't it?
Is it any wonder that Bobby Heenan left
like
the
a Glasgow
WWF
night to me?
Just being disrespected this badly, not being allowed into the building. No wonder he left the WWF.
We'll get to that in due course.
Too long after.
Another show. Do you remember this show, All American Wrestling, Max?
I didn't until this very moment where they just revealed it again and sort of come back to me.
This is another one that used to, have some recordings of and pass on to me. And tickets are still available if you want to go in a time machine back 30 years for the Monday Night Raw event of January 18th and Monday, February 1st. So a little ad running there as well, Max.
And one of the big sort of things, the selling points about this whole new Raw show was the fact that it was being broadcast from New York, from Manhattan, the center of the world for most Americans. I think that really added.
Again, Wax?
Yep, don't worry. I spotted her, Fash. I'm sure you did too. Macho Man with a traditionally very blingy outfit, looking
Vince
good.
Man with the famous tuxedo.
Yeah,
and it's red for Raw, and then Rob Bartlett with the Monday Night Raw t-shirt. You see a can of Sprite there. And now they're showing what happened this past week on Superstars with Kamala getting a bit of abuse now. Since, last we saw him, he was in a coffin, Wax. And then he was eventually removed from the coffin by Harvey Whippleman and Kim Chi. And now what they're basically showing is that, Kamala's not getting the pins right. He's confused. And now they've started to abuse him more and more, these two.
Yeah, definitely.
The crowd is getting behind Kamala. They don't like this. It was uncomfortable to watch.
It was genuinely uncomfortable to watch. It was actually.
But then what you see is Slick, Reverend Slick. He's back and he comes out and he faces Kim Chi, and Harvey Whippleman gets in the middle of it and says, "Look, essentially, stop behaving like this. Stop treating Kamala like this. He's a babyface now. He's a reverend, and this is going to lead to the angle of Slick taking over as Kamala's manager and trying to, I guess, bring him into more of a kind of normal way of acting. I'm looking for some words here, searching for words, but he's going to, essentially try to take him away from his jungle type ways and make him more civilized in the coming weeks. But you see Kamala now, after, you know, Harvey Whippleman and Kimchi drop Slick, he is now looking a bit angry, and he chops Kimchi right out from the ring to the outside, and Harvey Whippleman, he's chasing him, but Harvey Whippleman's going to run away, and Kamala's going to run right after him. So once again, see, at this point, and I think even up to, I would probably say 95 and 96, you saw a change. Superstars was still a big show for angles and matches, and actually I would argue a number of the big storylines and, you know, angles will still take place on Superstars, and both shows will alternate between, you know, what's happening. You need to really catch that wrestling challenge.
It would definitely take some time for Raw to bed down a format that really worked.
Yeah,
probably
and I think even
years,
though it was the main night, but you know, you still saw a lot of stuff, and you are going to see a lot of stuff on Superstars. And here's our main event of the night: Damien Demento, who didn't last long either, and a man who, you know, look at this, been here on the first Raw, and, you know, has went through so many changes over his time.
And I'm sure he will be in attendance on the 30-year anniversary.
I'm sure, but, you know, from here, the first show, going through the pains of this new generation era, then on the cusp of the Attitude Era, lived through the Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression, and everything after that. The Undertaker, I think, in hindsight, very apropos that he's the one that's closing out this first show.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that, you know, he would remain the constant over the next 30 years? I know he's recently retired, but even now, you know, the Undertaker generates a reaction. And as you say, if he's on that show, he's going to get a big, big pop. But yeah, just surreal to see, you know, at this point, he was, you know, he debuted in 91. A number of people have left going into 1993. He doesn't need a title. And, you know, he's just this character that always gets a reaction from the audience. Damien Demento, not so much.
Definitely not. I thought this character was horrible. He's a horrible wrestler.
He was from the outer. He was from the outer reaches of your mind, Wax.
Exactly. And I hoped he'd stayed there, but no, he had to come forefront into the ring.
Well, he's a bit of a flurry from Damien at the beginning, but
it didn't last long. Taker's not going to
smacked off the mat.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul Bearer.
One thing we're talking about, Wax, in the coming weeks is the last we saw, I say, Undertaker vanquished Kamala. They're building to this big angle and match, Nails versus The Undertaker.
Yep.
Since we last spoke, Nails has been fired. I think we need to cover that.
Definitely.
But right now, Undertaker, you know, what happens next? Harvey Whippleman has said he wants revenge on The Undertaker, and something will take place a few weeks in the Royal Rumble.
But and I can't wait to talk about that, because one of the much maligned things these days is when people look back at old wrestling angles and say, this was terrible, that was terrible. But in the time, in the moment when you're sitting there watching it, it feels real. It feels like amazing. And I want to touch on that next time we get a chance
we
to
sure will.
Chat
but I would say, so Nails is gone, and we'll talk about why he's gone in a future episode. But The Undertaker does need a new opponent now, or a new kind of feud. We will see that. It's certainly not going to be Damien Demento. He's not going to last long either. And it's just interesting when you look at some of this cast of characters, right? Coco Bewere's not long for the WWF now. Max Moon's not going to last long. Damien Demento's not going to last long. But then you've got other guys that are going to be more prominent. Yokozuna, of course, The Undertaker, the Steiner brothers. You know,
it's still a roster in flux. I mean, we talked about it. This whole 12 months, 18 months has been transitioning. People going out and people coming in, and that will continue for some time until we sort of settle into a routine.
And our tombstone's coming, Wax. This is not going to last long. The classic move, the move that always gets a pop, boom, put the hands together, and it's going to be a 1, a 2, and a 3 in the classic Undertaker.
And we forget, this is only probably, it's less than 18 months into Undertaker's run, start with the WWF, and he's sort of main eventing.
Yeah, and he's more than established, because the way they brought him in, you know, we've talked about the super push rate. We're talking about he's nothing like The Undertaker, how he was pushed from day one. So he just feels like he's been around for years.
Yep.
And certainly when you look at him, he feels like he's been around for years. But you know, that's our main event of the first Monday Night Raw.
And interesting, so I was just going to mention a couple of people that we didn't really see.
Again.
A couple of people we didn't really see on the show.
Wait a minute. Doink's, I think you need to pipe down here, Wax, because Doink.
Well, none of this audio is coming through for our audience, Fash, so I think it doesn't really matter what Doink says.
But what do you think he's talking about here? I'll tell you if you don't know. You tell us.
He's talking about people not having a sense of humor, Fash.
I think you've got no sense of humor, but yeah, I think Vince McMahon is talking
this
about
was one
Crush,
of the
and here
big
we go.
angles
Crush
of
comes
the first half of the year, wasn't it?
And Crush has not been happy with Doink's kind of behavior around the fans. Initially, people just thought he was a clown. Now he's got more mic time, and a Crush is going to come out and face him and essentially say, "Brah, don't do any of this stuff, or you're going to be in trouble." It's interesting once again we went very quickly from that last match to this angle, and I suspect you didn't recall, and I didn't recall that this was closing out the show.
Definitely not. But it just goes to show again, they're trying to push Crush, aren't they? Quite heavily as well as a big timer.
It's a bit of an odd one, isn't it? Because Crush came in 1982, initially a big push, and then he's not there for a few events. Now you've got this thing with the Doink. He's chasing around Doink around the ring now, and you're not sure what they're going to do with Crush. But as you say, it feels like he's going to get a big push. But this is going to kind of be his big, I guess, last babyface hurrah here. For a number of years until he turns heel. But so basically, he's running Doink's feigning fear.
I think Doink gets the better of this exchange.
Yeah, he runs away. But I think Wax, you thought this was the big angle here, but it's not. The angle's going to take place.
No. I knew it was the big angle. I was saying to say that we're ending the show here with
the
star of the show, which is Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Well, Heenan finally gets in to the Manhattan Center, but the show's actually came to an end, and that closes the first Monday Night Raw. As I say, I did not recall the fact that it ended with Crush and Doink.
There's some long-term story looking there with those two, and it's going to be a feud that lasts weeks ago
for a while, and we're going to see a lot coming from those two. But look, we've had a couple of I guess interferences in our show as well today, Wax. I say I sent Max Mini to do you over, and I can tell since that you're not talking very clearly, so that it worked. But what did you think of the first Monday Night Raw watching it back? Any kind of key thoughts that you have before we close up?
Well, I think firstly you've got to compare it to what just came before, which was Primetime Wrestling, and what else is on Superstars. I like the look. I really did enjoy the fact that it looks so different to a regular wrestling show that we had come to get used to at that point. I enjoyed the sort of small scale audience, but the intimate nature of it all. And I just generally thought it was quite a happening show. I mean, obviously there wasn't a lot to talk about in terms of in-ring performances or big debuts and stuff. And I was missing a couple of key characters like Ric Flair. Bret Hart never really made an appearance on the show. And you really would have expected that for like a big launch of a new show. I just thought it gave a really cool vibe, different to what we'd seen in the past.
Absolutely, I'd agree with you. It was about the look, the freshness of it. Yes, some of the big names missing. At the time, we didn't know how big this would be. Obviously, I think people probably would have still thought Superstars is the main show, but this was different. Monday night in the US is a big deal. So for a debut show, it was interesting. When you compare to today's time, obviously it's a little bit more uneventful, given you had mostly squash matches. But for me, the MVP of the night was Bobby Heenan, doing what he does best, excellent comedy throughout. So that was interesting and different, given they were doing the outside shots and what's happening in the ring. And obviously they're really hyping up the Royal Rumble in 2 weeks. I think we're going to see the first classic match of Monday Night Raw in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll cover that. But for our opening show, it's great to kind of go back and see it, especially as I say, we are on Sunday. Tomorrow night, we're going to see the 30th anniversary show. So, watching this, really geared up for that one. Really enjoyed going through this episode. And I hope the listeners and viewers have as well.
Yeah, you can't underplay the importance of this first show in terms of just getting Monday nights kicking off to what we know.
Kicking off in the 95, we get the Monday Night Wars as well. Wax, do you remember what the first caption for Monday Night Raw was? And
no, I don't, Fash. You'll have to remind me.
Well, I'm not going to remind you. You tell us in the next episode. Okay. Or in the comments section, please, who remembers what the first kind of slogan for Monday Night Raw was that lasted for a reasonable amount of time? We'll leave that to the viewers and the listeners then, Wax, given you failed yet again. I mean, how many times are you going to job to my questions? Feels like it's just a constant. But
Fash, as you know, this is not a general knowledge quiz, Fash. This is a wrestling show. It's all about entertainment.
This is wrestling. Oh, the memories.
You got to bring some fire here, Fash. You got to bring the fire. You can't be sitting back in your chair, laid back.
The memories part is pretty key here, Wax. I
Too
think
much
you need
dinner, I
to,
think that's
like
what
I
you've
say,
had,
Max
Fash.
Many knocked you into next week.
He did do
Next
that.
time,
I've got the
come
scratches to prove it
prepared.
as well.
Come prepared. And next time we'll do this again. We have lots of, we've got lots of interesting stuff to cover in the coming weeks. Enjoy the Monday Night Raw anniversary tomorrow, everyone. Hopefully it's a good show. Of course, the shadow of Vince McMahon is looming on us all again. And what appropriate time he wasn't going to miss being around the company when it came to the big 30-year anniversary.
And rightly he shouldn't.
Well, yeah, and like I say, very interesting time
Yeah.
in professional wrestling. We have the Royal Rumble coming next Saturday. We will do our 1993 Royal Rumble watch along, but we have some other interesting stuff coming up as well from this period. Until next time, he's been Wax. I'm Fash, and this is Wrestling with Memories. Wax's bad memories.